wishes to ask me. Though naturally, I don't know anything about this girl. Inspector, gravely. We'll see, Mrs. Burling. Enter Burling, who closes the door behind him. Burling, rather hot, bothered. I've been trying to persuade Eric to go to bed, but he won't. Now he says you told him to stay up. Did you? Inspector, yes, I did. Burling, why? Inspector, because I shall want to talk to him, Mr. Burling. Burling, I can see why you should. But if you must, then I suggest you do it now. Have him in and get it over. Then let the lad go. Inspector, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry, but he'll have to wait. Burling, now look here, Inspector. Inspector cutting in with authority. He must wait his turn. Sheila to Mrs. Burling. You see? Mrs. Burling. No, I don't. And please be quiet, Sheila. Burling, angrily. Inspector, I've told you before, I don't like your tone or the way you are handling this inquiry. And I don't propose to give you much more rope. Inspector, you needn't give me any rope. Sheila, rather wildly, with laugh. No, he's giving us rope, so that we'll hang ourselves. Burling to Mrs. Burling. What's the matter with his child? Mrs. Burling, overexcited, and she refused to go, with sudden anger, to Inspector. Well, come along, what is it you want to know? Inspector, coolly. At the end of January, last year, this girl, Eva Smith, had to leave Millwoods because Miss Burling, compelled them to discharge her. And then she stopped being Eva Smith, looking for a job, and became Daisy Renton with other ideas, sharply turning on him. Mr. Croft, when did you first get to know her? An exclamation of surprise from Burling and Mrs. Burling. Gerald, where did you get the idea that I did know her? Sheila, it's no use, Gerald. You're wasting time. Inspector, as soon as I mentioned the name Daisy Renton, it was obvious you'd known her. You gave yourself away at once. Sheila, bitterly. Of course he did. Inspector, and anyhow, I knew already. When and where did you first meet her? Gerald, all right, if you must have it. I met her first, sometime in March last year, in the Stores Bar at the Palace. I mean the Palace Music Hall here in Bromley. Sheila, well, we didn't think you meant Buckingham Palace. Gerald to Sheila, thanks, you're going to be a great help, I can see. You've set your pace, and you're obviously going to hate this, so why on earth don't you leave us out to it? Sheila, nothing would induce me. I want to understand exactly what happens when a man says he's so busy at the works that he can hardly ever find time to come and see the girl he's supposed to be in love with. I wouldn't miss it for the worlds. Inspector with authority. Yes, Mr. Croft, in the Stores Bar at the Palace, Variety Theatre. Gerald, I happened to look in one night after a rather long dull day, and as the show wasn't very bright, I went down into the bar for a drink. It's a favourite haunt of women of the town. Mrs. Burling, women of the town? Burling, yes, but I see no point in mentioning the subject, especially indicating Sheila. Mrs. Burling, it would be much better if Sheila didn't listen to the story at all. Sheila, but you're forgetting I'm supposed to be engaged to the hero of it. Go on, Gerald. You went down into the bar, which is your favourite haunt of women of the town. Gerald, I'm glad I amused you. Inspector, sharply. Come along, Mr. Croft. What happened? Gerald, I didn't propose to stay long down there. I hate those hard-eyed, dough-faced women. But then I noticed a girl who looked quite different. She was very pretty, soft brown hair, and big dark eyes. Breaks off. My God! Inspector, what's the matter? Gerald distressed. Sorry, I've suddenly realized, taken it in properly, that she's dead. Inspector, harshly. Yes, she's dead. Sheila, and probably between us we killed her. Mrs. Burling, sharply. Sheila, don't talk nonsense. Sheila, you wait, mother. Inspector, to Gerald, go on. Gerald, she looked young and fresh and charming and altogether out of place down there. And obviously she wasn't enjoying herself. Old Joe Mergate, half drunk and goggle-eyed, had wedged her into a corner with that obscene fat carcass of his. Mrs. Burling cutting in. There's no need to be disgusting. And surely you don't mean Alderman Mergate. Gerald, of course I do. He's a notorious womanizer, as well as being one of the worst sorts and rogues in Bromley. Inspector, quite right. Mrs. Burling staggered. Well, really, Alderman Mergate, I must say, we are learning something tonight. Sheila coolly. Of course we are. But everybody knows about the horrible old Mergate. A girl I know had to see him at the town hall one afternoon, and she only escaped with her torn blows. Burling, sharply shocked. Sheila! Inspector, to Gerald. Go on, please. Gerald, the girl saw me looking at her, and then gave me a glance that was nothing less than a cry for help. So I went across and told Joe Mergate some nonsense, that the manager had a message for him or something like that, got him out of the way, and then told the girl that if she didn't want any more of that sort of thing, she'd better let me take her out of there. She agreed at once. Inspector, where did you go? Gerald, we went along to the county hotel, which I knew would be quiet at the time of the night, and we had a drink or two and talked. Inspector, did she drink much at that time? Gerald, no, she only had a port and lemonade or some such concoction. All she wanted was some talk, a little friendliness, and I gathered that Joe Mergate's advances had left her rather shaken, as well they might. Inspector, she talked about herself. Gerald, yes, I asked her questions about herself. She told me her name was Daisy Renton, that she lost both her parents, that she came originally from somewhere outside Bromley. She also told me she'd had a job in one of the works here and had to leave after a strike. She said something about the shop too, but wouldn't say which it was, and she was deliberately vague about what happened. I couldn't get in any exact details from her about her past life. She wanted to talk about herself, just because she felt I was interested and friendly. But at the same time, she wanted to be Daisy Renton and not Eva Smith. In fact, I heard that name for the first time tonight. What she did let slip, though she didn't mean to, was that she was desperately hard up, and at the moment was actually hungry. I made the people at the county fair find some food for her. Inspector, and then you decided to keep her as your mistress. Mrs. Burling, what? Sheila, of course, mother. It was obvious from the start. Go on, Gerald, don't mind mother. Gerald steadily, I discovered, not that night, but 2 nights later, when we met again, not accidentally this time, of course, that in fact she hadn't a penny, and was going to be turned out of the miserable back room she had. It happened that a friend of mine, Charlie Brunswick, had gone off to Canada for 6 months, and had let me have the key of a nice little set of rooms he had in Morgan Terrace, and had asked me to keep an eye on them for him and use them if I wanted to. So I insisted on Daisy moving into those rooms, and I made her take some money to keep her going there. Carefully to the inspector, I want you to understand that I didn't install her there so that I could make love to her. I made her go to Morgan Terrace because I was sorry for her, and didn't like the idea of her going back to the Palace Bar. I didn't ask her for anything in return. Inspector, I see. Sheila, yes, but why are you all saying that to him? You ought to be saying it to me. Gerald, I suppose I ought really. I'm sorry, Sheila. Sheila, cutting in as he hesitates. I know, somehow he makes you. Inspector, but she became your mistress. Gerald, yes. I suppose it was inevitable. She was young and pretty and warm-hearted, and intensely grateful. I became at once the most important person in her life, you understand. Inspector, yes. She was a woman. She was lonely. Were you in love with her? Sheila, just what I was going to ask. Burling angrily, I really must protest. Inspector, turning on him sharply, why should you do any protesting? It was you who turned the girl out in the first place. Burling, rather taken aback. Well, I only did what any employer might have done, and what I was going to say was that I protest against the way in which my daughter, a young unmarried girl, is being dragged into this. Inspector, sharply, your daughter isn't living on the moon. She's here in Bromley too. Sheila, yes, and it was I who had the girl turned out of a job at Millwoods, and I'm supposed to be engaged to Gerald, and I'm not a child, don't forget. I've a right to know. Were you in love with her, Gerald? Gerald hesitantly, it's hard to say. I didn't feel about her as she felt about me. Sheila, with sharp sarcasm, of course not. You were the wonderful fairy prince. You must have adored it, Gerald. Gerald, all right. I did for a time. Nearly any man would have done. Sheila, that's probably about the best thing you've ever said tonight.